Veteran's Voice, stories that deserve to be heard, is proudly sponsored by Calling Gilbert, Wright and Carter.
My name is Jose Belen, United States Army, Field Artillery, E-4 Specialist, and this is my story. I had a pretty rough childhood. I'm from upstate New York, a small town called Amsterdam. You know, just like a lot of kids who grow up on the streets and stuff, I made some stupid choices and ended up failing 11th grade. It took 5 years to graduate high school, graduated in the summer of 2001. But prior to that, I knew that I didn't have the discipline to go to college. I knew that if I made that decision, just like all my other friends, that I more than likely would not be doing the right thing at school. And so I decided, unbeknownst to my family, that I'm going to join the military, because my thought process, and I remember it clear as day, I told myself, if I can do this, I can do anything. I was naive in a sense. I got to basic training and thought it would all kind of go, dress right dress and be easy, but it wasn't. I found out that I had asthma in basic training, had no idea. Had a drill sergeant make fun of me. He said I was going to be back on the block as the guy who never made it through basic training, because I had to run on a treadmill with this machine on, and if I didn't have enough oxygen in my lungs, they were going to kick me out. Again, as fate has it, I ran that treadmill and I was okay, so ended up graduating basic training and AIT, and that's advanced individual training that happens after you pass basic training. I got to Germany when I was 19 in the summer of 2002. My command was outstanding as soon as I got there. Tons of support, as a kid, out of basic training. You have to earn your stripes. And it was around, wintertime 2002 that the drums of war started beating for us. We had a little bit of an inclination that something was coming. I was part of the 1st Armored Division, Old Ironsides, 1st Brigade Combat Team. It's one of the most decorated divisions, armored divisions in the United States Army. So my job, or our job, field artillery, combat. So whenever you're going to go to war, you need to have all these elements ready. So we started training heavy beginning of the year. And then we had a formation, and they told us, they said, look, guys, we're rolling out to war. Our job, for our division was to secure Baghdad. That was the spring of 2003. I was 20 years old when I got to combat. I didn't leave until I was 22. I had my 21st and 22nd birthday in combat. I served 14 consecutive months in combat. Lost my best friend, my roommate, who took me under his wing when I got to Germany on December 22nd, 2003. And that was a tough day for a lot of us, but it hurt me a lot because I also lost my Lieutenant Saltz in that attack on December 22nd. But what hurt about that day was I was part of a quick reactionary force, and each soldier had like a revolving day off, if you will. It took like 90 days, but that morning or that day was my day off. I remember speaking to Stuart, asking him how he was feeling. He was really quiet that morning, and this day didn't feel good. He had a headache, and we kind of went our different ways. Went to my room and went to sleep. Woke up, feeling somewhat refreshed, went to have breakfast. All of a sudden the radio starts going crazy. They scream for the QRF, and QRF, you have to literally be ready in about 90 seconds, full combat load, to roll out to whatever's happening. And being the lead Humvee gunner, I always put a little bit of extra pressure on myself. We got out, the loadout, ready to rock and roll and go into combat, but over the radio, they told us to stand down. And I'm kind of looking around, and I see some unfamiliar faces from from another platoon, another section. I start asking questions. Well, where's this guy? Where's that guy? And they said, well, these guys went, in your place. They kind of like changed the times or whatever the case may be, and they rolled out. So again, we're still kind of just sitting there idle, which is not normal. And then it came on the radio that Alpha Battery had 2 KIA killed in action. And something kind of just told me, that he was gone. I just one of those feelings. And they told us to stand down. Everyone got off the Humvees, and it was one of the eeriest times while we were there because we hadn't lost anyone of our own yet. I went to guard duty. I had, a tower guard duty, and I remember just being numb, staring at the Humvees because they said, well, maybe we'll still have you guys come out, so just kind of be on standby. Never happened. I remember one of my sergeants, Sergeant Chitty, was our armorer, come out screaming. I mean, this guy, 250-pound solid rock, just screaming. Another sergeant come out crying. How do you call a mother and tell her son's died 2 days before Christmas? From there, our commander, Captain Vince Aguirre, who's now Lieutenant Colonel for NATO, kind of huddled us up together with tears, streaming down his wily X's, and said, let's have a formation in the TV room. And we went back there, all of us. We had 2 platoons in Alpha Battery, and my commander starts speaking alongside our First Sergeant Wolford, and this man's First Sergeant Wolford, old school Army, drill sergeant. I mean, just the example of what a soldier should want to be one day. And I never thought I'd see this man cry. He was larger than life. Just to remind me of the refrigerator Perry who played for the Bears. And I just see tears, coming down he's not saying anything, but I just see the tears. And they said the names. And it was like a dagger, There was rage, sadness. I mean, I'm still not, you'll never be okay with it. You always want to be able to say goodbye, and more importantly, you want to be able to fight with them and shield them. That's the one thing that, when you're at war and you go, together with each other, and you hear the term band of brothers thrown around, but that doesn't make up for the reality of what a brotherhood is. So, that hurt. Sorry. So, we drove on. After that, we had a funeral for them on December 27th there, and bagpipes played. Scotland the Brave, Amazing Grace, and it was one of the most hurtful experiences of my life because you're in a place that's surrounded by death 100% of the time, and sometimes you're the one dealing it. But when it's one of your own, it hurts. And so, it took me, I left combat in, it was July 2004, and to this day I can't listen to bagpipes. I try, I go, but anytime they play Scotland the Brave or Amazing Grace, I just go right back to that morning. So that was difficult. In combat, while we were out there, soldiers were supposed to be given 2 weeks of R&R, rest and relaxation, to go back home. And after I graduated basic training and went home, I hadn't gone back home. And so the fear was that, I'd die out there without being able to see my mom or my family. So those 2 weeks was something like, okay, let me at least get those, because I know the reality of where I'm at out here and what I do every day. And the type of soldier I was, I found comfort in combat, I always say I found beauty in hell somehow. I was always volunteering and excited for the rush, but I'd call home to my mom and, I'd have blood scrapes. I just, for example, just finished doing a major raid somewhere, 130 degrees. I got no water in 12 hours, half dead nearly. But, I'd call home and, hey, Mom, how are you? And she, are you okay? Like, oh, yeah. Are you fighting? No, I'm over here, I'm looking at myself. And so what ended up happening was I was kind of told that I'd be going home for the next round of R&R. And I was like, great, send an email home, call home, and family booking tickets, and everyone's so excited. And then a few weeks before the date, command would come by and say, hey, sorry, we need to let this soldier go in your place because you're single and you have no dependents. You'll go on the next round. Okay. I call home and I say, Mom, sorry, not this time, but next time, And there's sometimes it'd be a month or twice in between the rotations, so which is an eternity there. Again, came up, Belen, you're going home. And then again, hey, sorry, man. This guy's going to go in your place because you're single and got no dependents. He's got a wife and kids. And okay. By that time, I already lost, my best friend. And, saw an immense amount of combat. Was totally okay with death. I'm very in touch with my faith in God. And early on in the deployment, I accepted that I may die out there, and that was okay. The one thing I'd pray for every morning was, just don't let me suffer. I'd wake up every morning and just thank God for letting me see another sunrise, and sometimes 12, 18 hours later when I was able to go to sleep, I thank Him for letting me see another night. And so once you accept death in combat, you really have no fear. During the most intense moments, just fight. No fear, look at them right in their eyes and understand that's either you or me. If you shoot me, it's fine. That's kind of the element I was in. So going home for those 2 weeks was pretty imperative for me. And what ended up happening lastly is they again offered me to go home. And then on the last time said, we're going to send this sergeant in your place. Heard it a bunch of times. But this time, they said, unless he's willing to give the spot back to you. And this sergeant and I had a really good relationship, just, always respected him and the way he led. And he looks at me and he said, sorry, kid. Gotta go home. And I said, okay, man. I told him, I said, you know what? If I die in these 2 weeks, make sure you call my mother and you tell her and my dad that they had an opportunity to see their son. But it's okay, man. I understood. I forgave him. And to add insult to injury, they had me be the gunner to take him to the airport. It was, again, okay. Been through all this stuff. And when that happened, that was the moment that I was blood dry of all emotion. That was the last sliver of, humanity, I guess, if you want to call it. Just that last little bit of touch of who I was before I went to combat. When I came home, to open arms family, my city, Amsterdam, New York, did a little parade. My family had a banner, welcome home. I was kind of like the hero of the town. So there was tons of support when I came home. But I knew when I touched down at Albany Airport in upstate New York that I knew there was something wrong with me. There was absolutely no joy being there. And I had been gone, over, 2 years, no joy whatsoever. Just going through the motions, best friend picks me up. Everyone balloons everywhere. And I'm faking the phone. Yeah. Get home. And my mom had no idea I was coming home. Nobody knew. Knocked on the front door. My little brother Shane answered the door. He was about 8 years old at the time. Looking at me. He's like, oh my God, pick him up, hug him. My stepfather, was there. And I'm like, where's Mom? And she was in the back patio with a couple of her friends. And I just stood in the doorway. And my mom had her back to the door. My mom's friend was facing the door, and she just sees me standing there, and she screamed, kind of like, oh my God. My mother's like, what? And she's like, and my mom turns around and just sees her son standing there. And she scream, hug, celebrate, and family all comes together, friends, best friends. Jose's home, he made it, But again, internally, I could care less, really, So a couple months after being home, family starts noticing things, friends say, hey, have you been to the VA yet? Or, no, I don't got to go to that, Yeah, well, maybe you should check it out. They're there for you. And at that point, I'm the most mentally strong person I know. I'm like, I just survived, all this stuff. I don't need help from anybody. But finally got to the point where the nightmares are too much, the anger. I was like about to re-enlist to go special forces. I contacted a recruiter. I'm like, okay, I can't do this life, But again, something was like, no, don't do that. I always kind of like hang up the phone or like cancel the email. And went to the VA. And at this point, they weren't really even calling it PTSD. It was like shell shock still. No one really knew what the hell it was. And the doctor says, well, you're going to be limited, to things in life, employment and this and that. And I'm 23, I'm like, oh, and by the way, here are all these pills. And I'm like, well, what are the pills for? Like, oh, they help you sleep, get your mood, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm naive to all that. I'm like, all right, great, let's go. And so, get on my first round of pills. The pills put me in a path to almost take my life. Made me even more depressed. So I went back to the VA, said, I can't do this. Well, let's switch the medicines out and this and that. And I said, heck with you guys. No. I was diagnosed with PTSD a long time ago. But for a warrior and someone who's been through what I've been through personally, accepting that diagnosis there's just no way. Because again, you're mentally, strong and all this and that. So, my wife and I, our 2 kids, we fell on really hard times. We started facing some extreme challenges financially. My wife was laid off twice. And the amount of income I was making at the time, well into the 6 figures was enough to sustain us. It was okay. But then, changes happen, and that 6-figure salary went, or six figures, most of it was commission, but went down to my salary of $37,000 a year. And as you can imagine, to feed a family of 4, who just a few months before was used to living this way, was a kind of a nightmare. We went through depleted our savings. Again, the job just financially wasn't sustaining me. Tried to put feelers out there, but no one to really give me the shot that I needed for my family. So I started to drive deep into a depression. My PTSD started getting worse. My wife, Belen, has been with me through the very best of times and through she's been in the trenches with me. So when all this started happening, I just got worse, roller coaster, of emotions. Still doing my best at work, that never stopped. We got to a point where we just were at the Salvation Army, and from there we're, getting canned food at a food pantry and begging for county organizations to pay our bills to even keep our lights on. And I worked at home, so if my lights get shut off, I can't even make the $900 every 2 weeks that I'd make. So I was drinking behind my wife's back, just going through this horrible, just frightening time with PTSD. Again, I worked from home, so the family would leave, and I'd be home for 8 hours alone. And there was really no one to talk to because work was slow at the time, so I only had time with myself, which for a combat vet with PTSD is scary. Got to the point where I had a 6 Sauer 9mm subcompact because I have a concealed carry. But I'd look at the pistol and just be like, come on, man, that voice, be real fast. And I finally broke. I guess I'll just be honest with what happened to just kind of paint a picture for everyone of what, a scenario for a combat vet looks like. There was a Sunday morning that I'm a Giants fan. The Giants were playing in London. And that morning, for whatever reason, I thought my world was over. I'm like, life sucks. I'm just this angry vet, this and that. And my wife is sleeping. I break out the grill. Giants are playing at 9. Start grilling steaks in my driveway, But next to the grill, there was a bottle of whiskey. Started taking shots. 8:30 in the morning as I'm grilling, going inside, got the pregame on, life, I'm like, man, this is going to be a great day. And then, sit down and finish eating and stuff. And as I sit there, my mind starts to, again, wander. Start thinking of everything I've been through, the story, all that. To then be in a position where I feel like I can't even support my family. We're going to lose everything. And I start blaming myself. If you didn't join the military, if you, so I go through this whole conundrum, in my mind, all these thoughts. And I start crying, just obviously a few shots of whiskey at 8:30 in the morning, aren't going to help. And, in the years that I left combat, if you were to come to my house, you'd never know that a veteran lived there. All my awards, all my trophies, my dress screens, you see in the movies, decorations, all that, been shoved in a box. My dress screens were kept in my third garage, never put it back on. I actually now appreciate that stuff, but always hated it because I never felt like I did anything. I didn't do enough. I didn't fulfill my, what I guess was my calling. So medals didn't mean anything. But as I'm sitting there, I see my dress screen, and this thought, comes to me like, just put it on, like look at all those medals, combat patches, combat stripes. Like you earned all that, man. Like, be proud of yourself. So I put this thing on, and I'm like Lieutenant Dan now, like in Forrest Gump. I'm in shorts. I got this, decorative jacket on, veteran hat on, I'm grilling, I'm in the neighborhood and stuff in my driveway. So I put it on, like, man, you did all this, you did all that. So I'm happy again. And then, for whatever reason, there's an Iraq battle flag. There's a full flag I have, from the war. Couldn't find the box. So then I got mad, upset, started, going through an emotional, moment again. And it was at that moment that, because I had surrendered my weapons, prior to this, I wish I had a gun. Crying. One part of my mind is like, you're fine, Jose. The other side is like, no, and it's just this whirlwind of just your mind. You just can't contain it. And I started texting my brother Shane, telling him all this. I'm a loser. I caused all this. If I had my gun right now, I'd shoot myself. And I just remember at that moment thinking of my family, my friends, and all that. My children, and understanding how selfish that would be. But then there was like a wall that wouldn't allow the emotional impact of what all that means to get to me. And I just remember thinking it would be so fast. And about 10 minutes later, my best friend and my brother pull into my driveway and are freaked out. Like, we got to get you out of the house. Like, and they wake up my wife, and as you can imagine, everyone's like in panic mode and just scared, for me. And my wife, took me to my mom's house, called the VA. The VA was, wanted to, have me committed, or, they would do a Baker Act, if necessary. So when we get to the VA, the doctor who prescribed me the initial set of medicine wasn't there that day. So I had to meet with another doctor. This doctor says, hey, we actually made a mistake. We put you on the wrong medicine. These two medicines are some of the most powerful medicines available. We're sorry about that. We'll get you on something new. And as you can imagine, my wife flips out. I'm about to lose it. My wife, she's like, no, Jose, and they say, oh, we're sorry, these things happen. And she says, well, don't you realize that by that mistake, if my husband would have had access to a weapon, he would have ended his own life? And there was just like a silence in the room. Yeah, but, we're going to get it right now. And it's like, no. So that didn't go too well. The doctor said, oh, we'll put in the script for you. It'll be available next week. We're taking you off these medicines today. Okay. Left the VA, and I remember my wife, she said, so that's all you're going to do? Put notes in your computer and throw more pills at him after all this? Well, ma'am, there's really not much. And at that point, I was like, I give up. My wife, she's been a champion for me. I always tell her she saved my life. I wear a bracelet here for the National Suicide Awareness Hotline for veterans. Saturday night at almost midnight, because the imbalance from the meds, they mess with your mind. Got the thought, I didn't want to live anymore, and my wife says, call the number on the bracelet. It's midnight, it's Saturday, where are you going to go? So I call the number, and a man answered the phone. He stayed on the phone with me for 2 hours. Until I was stable enough to get off that phone call. I knew I couldn't go back to the insurance job because that was just not a good environment, obviously, for me to be home alone working. I knew I couldn't go back to the VA for help. And so all of a sudden my mind, started thinking, what can you do? How can you move forward? And we lose 16 to 22 veterans a day to suicide, PTSD. And I said, Jose, you're the voice. So what I did is, for about a week's time, after the family would go to bed, I'd go into a downstairs room. I started writing my story. Where did this journey even start? And it started when I failed 11th grade. And we've all been told our whole lives the sky's the limit. And I've always kind of challenged that. I said the sky's not the limit. You know, so when I started thinking of how I made it through all this stuff, I said it's because I never accepted that the sky was the limit. The sky's not the limit. I mean, if you think about it, it's really not. You can always continue to ascend. So I said, I'm gonna start my company or something. You know, I reached out to a dear friend of mine, Adam Barnes. Told him, you know, what I had going on, and he said, you know what? Because I couldn't even afford the Sunbiz filing. He paid it for me. And I believe it was December 7, 2016, founded The Sky's Not the Limit, LLC. And the thought process at the time was to, do some type of developmental mentoring for veterans in corporate America and incorporate, my professional success, as an insurance professional, and give back to companies or corporations who have veterans on staff who are struggling, or just anyone on staff that is stressed, because I know stress, PTSD, stress, right? So I said, maybe we can do that. This is all grassroots, so go through the beginning of the year, and I resign, from my insurance position in February of 2017. And by chance, I was invited to a meeting for the Florida Association of Veteran-Owned Businesses, and a gentleman who's been behind me from day one, Rick Garcia from Havoc Media Group, had me come out to this meeting, and unbeknownst to me, he introduced me to the entire group and had me come up. And I spoke a little bit and got a bunch of this, and I was like, great, maybe I helped some people here with the PTSD, and made some connections there. Slowly but surely, some folks in the Orlando community caught notice. A good friend of mine, Kyle Evans, spoke at the Florida Association of Veteran-Owned Businesses board meeting. I think it was March, and I was in attendance. I attend all the board meetings there, and he mentions the Veterans Voice, Channel 6, and I'm like, okay. Leave the board meeting, called, Channel 6, and I said, I need to speak to whoever's in charge of the Veterans Voice, if that's possible. Well, who's calling? Jose Belen, I'm a veteran. Okay, one moment, we'll put you in contact with someone. And that someone was Philip Deems. I told him my story, what I aim to do, and this man said, Jose, I can't wait to meet you. And here I am today. So speaking for me has just been something that has come from just the most gut-wrenching and painful times. But the overall goal is to help end veteran suicide one day. I mean, June is PTSD Awareness Month. I just found out 2 months ago. No one even knows, for the most part, this PTSD Awareness Month. That's not okay. I've just knocked on every door, made hundreds of phone calls, radio stations, news channels, anyone that will give me a platform to speak. Because if I can inspire those who say today is my last day, but because I met Jose, or I heard Jose speak, there's some goodness in the world left. Maybe I'll hang around for one more day. because I met Jose. And if that one day turns into an entire life, not only did I help save a life, but I've also helped create a life. We fight two wars. We fight the war when we're there physically, but there's a war we fight when we come home. A lot of us, obviously, you can tell physically are challenged. Come home, loss of limbs, traumatic brain injuries, whatever the case may be. And everyone sees those folks and say, oh man, I'm so sorry, this and this and that. But what about the veteran like myself who has an invisible wound? There's an amazing organization called the Camaraderie Foundation here in Orlando that also I credit with help saving my life, because all the resources that are out there, all these pretty pamphlets with flags, they don't ever call you back. Some of the programs are defunded. You got a veteran that just, hey, I need help today. Oh, sorry, we don't have the budget anymore. There's this one organization, the Camaraderie Foundation. They awarded me a scholarship, $1,200 scholarship to any private psychiatrist in the area, paid for by them, so I did not have to go to the VA anymore. It was at that point I was introduced to Dr. Patrick Nave, who I credit with molding me back into who I was prior to Iraq, providing me the tools necessary. So when I speak, I not only speak for the veteran, I need to speak for the silent victim. My wife is a silent victim, my children. Because everyone focuses on the veteran. But what about that wife? What about that husband? What about those kids? They have to watch their father, their mother suffer. So they suffer to see us suffer, but what about them? When do they have time? Who takes care of them? This is something that I really want to bring to the forefront of the battle against PTSD. Is I want to change the 22, because those are lives. It's not just a number. I wouldn't have been just a number. I'm a father, a husband, a son. And this image I seen the other day was of a man holding his daughter. And the imagery in that haunted me, because we all look at the veteran. We lost a veteran. But that veteran was holding a child. Who's going to walk her down the aisle now? Who's going to teach her how to drive? What's her education path look like? Her protector's gone, her father, got mommy, but daddy's gone. That's happening 16 to 22 times a day. Lives destroyed every day. Children who are fatherless, motherless. Moms who just lost their son. We owe it to them to change it from a number to a life, I think America needs to understand that, and I think that's what can potentially change everyone's view on PTSD, and understand that, it's not just 4 letters. So now I speak. My company's Jose Belen Speaks. And I speak to give hope to the hopeless, help save lives, help create life, inspire generation, inspire those kids who are like myself, on the streets, to say, look, you can be here too. You don't have to, stay on this path. Be a trailblazer. Create your own path.